So we have added the two control points over here. Alright, and as I move it, okay, we can adjust the lines length and the angle and the slope. Alright, and if I just press elsewhere, okay, we can remove the control points. So now what I want to do is to have another way to remove these two control points by pressing, let's say, the line over here, okay, and the two control points would be removed. Alright, so let's get started. So over here, okay, what we can do is to add an event listener. Alright, now for this selection cleared, okay, this remove pointers, maybe what I can do is to rename this and make it remove pointers on selection cleared. Okay, so it's more specific to this event. Alright, and let's come up with another event. So the other event would be selection updated. Okay, selection updated over here. So let's say remove pointers on selection updated. Alright, so there is also another type of selection event, which is selection created event. Okay, now there is a difference between them. Okay, so before I proceed on to this, let me talk about the difference between selection updated and selection created. Alright, so let's say if I have two lines over here. Now, if there is no selection yet, alright, and if I select this object over here, the selection created event would fire off, alright. And now, if there is already a selection over here, and I go from one selection to another selection, the selection updated event would fire off, okay. So the difference is this, alright. So if I go from one selection to another, the selection created event would not fire off. Instead, it would be the selection updated event. Alright. So now, let's proceed on to this. So, let's write some coding for this function. Alright, so remove pointer on selection updated. So what we want to do is to select the line and remove the two pointers. Okay, so since it's a selection updated, we can pass in a parameter, and we can say let let object be equals to o dot target over here, and if object dot ID is equals to the ID of the line, so added line over here, alright, we remove the two pointers. Okay, so pointer 1 and pointer 2. So in order to remove the two pointers, we need to get their ID as well. Okay, and in order to get their ID, we can actually use this function over here. Alright, so instead of writing all this down again, we can just paste it over here and see how it goes. Alright, so let's see. Okay, so let's add the line over here, deactivate. So if I double click, I adjust the line, I click elsewhere. Okay, so the two control points are removed. I double click again, I adjust the line, and now I click on the line. And as you can see, the two pointers are removed as well. Okay, and if I double click, I can adjust the line again. Okay, I click on the line, and the two pointers are removed. Alright, now we can also do something else. Okay, so let's say if I add two lines over here, okay, And oops, sorry, I have to deactivate. So now, let's say I double click on this. Okay, I can click on this line and the 2 pointers would be removed. But let's say maybe if I click on other objects, I want the 2 lines to be, the 2 pointers to be removed, and it happens as well. Okay, why is this so? Alright, it's because of this selection updated. Alright, so when the selection is updated, okay, and if my object's ID is added line, alright, this code over here would be executed. Okay, so the pointer 1 and pointer 2, alright, would be removed. Okay, so everything seems fine over here. Okay, but I discovered a problem. Okay, so let me refresh this first. Alright, so let's say I have 2 lines over here. Okay, and let's say I want to adjust this first line. So I double click, and let's say I adjust this, and as you can see, the other line joins the pointer. Now, why is this so? Alright, well, it's because both of these lines have the same ID of added line. And looking back to our coding, okay, as I move the pointer, so the event that will fire off is this object moving, endpoint of line to follow pointer. So let's go to that function. And in this function, alright, it says that if the object's ID is pointer 1, okay, and we get all the objects, and if the object's ID is added line, alright, we set the x1 and the y1 coordinate of the object that has this ID added line, okay, to the pointers, to this pointer 1 position. Alright, so when I have 2 lines over here, these 2 lines have an ID of added line. Okay, but I only want to move the first line, not the second line. Okay, so how do we rectify this? Well, what we can do is to add another, okay, label, okay, to the added line when we double click on the line. Okay, so when we double click on this added line, not only do we add the 2 pointers, okay, what we can do is we can set a label. Okay, so object.label, we can, or rather, I can do it this way, object.set, alright, and we can give this object, which is the added line, okay, a label, alright, and this label we can say is selected line. Alright, so this means that when I double click on this line, alright, not only would it have an ID of added line, it would also have a label of selected line. Alright, so now back to this function over here, okay, for the endpoint of the line to follow the pointer. So now we have this condition: if the object's ID has an is added line, okay, we add another condition. So not only must it have an ID of added line, it must also have a label, okay, of selected line. Alright, so we do the same, okay, if we move pointer 2. Alright, so now let's see over here. So I have 2 lines over here. So I double click on this, and let's say I move this, and now the other line is not affected. Alright, the other line is not affected. But take note, okay, since I double click on this first line over here, it now has a label of selected line. Okay, so if I double click on this second line over here, alright, it would also have a label of selected line. And because of this, both lines now have a label of selected line. And if I move the pointer, as you can see, both lines are affected. Alright, so we have to rectify this as well. Okay, so we can rectify this in the remove. Okay, remove pointers on selection cleared. Okay, so what we can do is over here, alright, we can say if O dot label is equals to selected line. Alright, we set the label to be nothing at all. Okay, so the label is just blank over here. Okay, so this means that when the pointers, alright, are being removed, not only that, okay, if we have an object that has a label of this, the label would be set to blank, okay, to nothing. Alright, so let's try this out again. So I add 2 lines over here. Okay, so the first line, I double click. Now it has a label of selected line. So when I move the pointer, okay, the second line is not affected because the second line doesn't have this label of selected line. So now if I click on the second line and I double click on this, okay, before I double click on this, since the 2 pointers on the first line are cleared, alright, the first line has a label, okay, of nothing. Alright, so it doesn't have a label of selected line anymore. Alright, and now when I double click on this line, this second line over here, okay, it would have a label of selected line. And when I move the pointers, alright, since the first line doesn't have a label of selected line anymore, it is not affected. Okay, and if I do my if I just click elsewhere, now both of these 2 lines would not have a label of selected line anymore. Alright, so if I just want to adjust this again, as you can see, the second line is not affected. Alright, and let's say I adjust this second line, the first line is not affected.